Hello and welcome to our weekly devotional conversation. I'm Pastor Amy. This is Pastor Erik and Deacon Kari, and we are together every week this Lent talking about our Old Testament readings for the the 40 days of Lent. And this week we are going to be reading about the bronze snake in the wilderness.
If you'd like to follow along, we're in the book of Numbers, chapter 21, beginning at verse 4. That's Numbers 21, 4 through 9. From Mount Hor, they set out by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. But the people became impatient on the way. The people spoke against God and against Moses. "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and we detest this miserable food." Then the Lord sent poisonous serpents among the people, and they bit the people, so that many Israelites died. The people came to Moses and said, "We have sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord to take away the serpents from us." So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord said to Moses, "Make a poisonous serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten shall look at it and live." So Moses made a serpent of bronze and put it up on a pole, and whenever a serpent bit someone, that person would look at the serpent of bronze and live. This is the word of the Lord. So today we have a bit of a strange story, but really important nonetheless, and really filled with some interesting New Testament connections and some other broader theological concepts. But what jumped out from this story to you?
Well, one of the things for me is just that, this whole season we've been talking about covenant and God's promises and all of those, very prominent kind of promises.
Mm-hmm.
The promise with Noah, with the rainbow, promise with Abraham, the working out of the promises in the Ten Commandments. And now we get this weird story about the Israelites in the desert and the snakes. So for me, I just keep on thinking about what does this have to do with covenant?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's not as relational as the other ones that we've been reading.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it struck me too. I can't answer your covenant question right now, but as I was thinking about this, it's like this story, because it's like God has been providing for them all along.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have water. God provided water. They didn't, we don't have food, so manna comes. We don't have, we want meat, so then quail comes. And now they're grumbling, saying, we still don't have any food. Well, but the food we have, we don't like. And so before, God is saying, oh, here, and all of a sudden it's like, you know what, enough. Here, send serpents.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's a little disconcerting.
Yeah. I think, I don't like parts of this story, especially the part that talks about the Lord sending poisonous serpents. One of the things that I believe very deeply is that God does not give us the bad things that happen in our lives. God doesn't send illness or tragedy to teach us anything or to make us stronger or anything like that. That's not God's doing. That's a result of the sin of the world and sometimes of our own sin. But, God will accompany us through those bad things and help us and guide us through those. And we may learn something from it, but that's not God's intention,
Having little kids at my house.
Yeah.
Whenever we talk about the Bible before bedtime or whatever, it's pretty much always framed about how God is good and God is doing good things in their life. So to hear this story makes us think we have to backpedal a bit there.
Yeah. I was thinking about this a lot this week because I really don't like that it says that God sent poisonous snakes. And one of the things I thought was maybe, the Bible was written by human beings, and it's kind of a history in some parts a fable of, how humanity has related with God. And so I was thinking, well, maybe this is an interpretation from the people who wrote the Bible saying, this is how they believed that God sent the poisonous snakes. Maybe the snakes were there, but, the people believed that God sent them, So I don't like to chop through and mince things like that. But, sometimes you do have to consider, where does this word come from? It comes from people writing it down, people telling oral history and stories. And sometimes the nature of a fable, the nature of an oral history is that, you blame God for certain things so that the story can move along, And then the other thing I thought about with the snakes was that, God created all of the earth, and snakes are part of the system of the ecosystem of the earth, and so maybe it's a natural occurrence, that the people then connected to their disobedience. So I'm just trying to wrestle with that and figure out maybe.
Yeah, there's lots to wrestle with. I would always encourage someone to read all through this story, because you can't stop when talking about just the snakes coming. To follow it through to the end there, where we recognize that God is also the healing element in this story too. So God doesn't just send them and laugh and go away. God provides the agency for them to be healed and to live as well.
Well, and it makes me think about, because why then? So the serpent, the snakes come, and then God has Moses, because they pray. Moses prays and says, what do we do? And said, make a bronze serpent on a pole, and then have people look at that, and then they'll be healed. And so that has stuck with me too. It's like, so they really have to look at what was.
They do it means they have to actually get up and go and gather and to participate with other people of faith.
And look outside of their own, whatever's going on inside of them, and look up and look out,
So I think it's powerful to recognize that they can't fix themselves or heal themselves. They do need to look to God for that healing.
And I think that it's important to remember that, God gave them this means of healing. So, I found out in my kind of studies and things this week and my listening to commentaries and podcasts that later on, this snake on a pole actually does become an idol.
Yeah.
So much so that what is it, King Habakkuk or something like that, has to destroy it.
Yeah.
Because people are starting to look to this snake as a god and making it an idol. Whereas here, it hasn't gotten that far yet. People are seeing the snake and recognizing that God sent this as a healing agent for us. And seeing beyond what's on the pole and seeing that this is the means through which God is giving us healing. God is the one that we worship. God is the one that is giving us the healing through this means.
It's an important note, and I think people run with it today, where something that started off as a wonderful gift and a wonderful agency of healing, a wonderful agency of gathering people, strictly good things, which is this bronze serpent, became that idol. And oftentimes I wonder what kinds of things do we idolize today that started off as simply something good, and people have run with it and made it into something that it's not. Even things that are on the outside fine and good, but you look at the functions of church and the different groups that get together and do something? Is it simply to provide and to care for others, or has it evolved into other meetings?
Yeah.
One other thing to point out is I also think it's very relevant today, is to constantly ask people what the actual problem is. So in here, this story, and this is echoed throughout the Exodus event, but the people were constantly complaining. They were constantly upset with Moses and with Aaron and with the way things were going. They didn't like the food. They didn't have enough water. They didn't like staying in tents. They didn't like being on the move, and they're constantly complaining. So much so that they actually, really threaten Moses and the other leaders there. And you have to ask yourself, what is the actual problem? So the actual problem was not that they didn't have food that they liked, or it wasn't that they were uncomfortable. The actual problem was that there was an evil human slavery situation going on. That's what is the real problem. If they weren't enslaved and treated as less than human, that whole thing wouldn't have happened. So we look at things today, what do we complain about? And we think about it, what's the actual problem that's going on? So, just not to get too far into it, because it's more layered than I understand, but, a lot of people today, they complain or grumble about, not enough vaccine or not enough medical things that they need. So they get mad at the local hospital, or they get mad at a doctor or a nurse or some poor person on the phone that's trying to connect them. But the actual problem is that we don't have a healthcare system that's designed to really take care of every single person. So always look to see what the actual problem is. And it's a lesson that's hard learned.
This also, looking, like you were saying, looking kind of through and past this specific text, I'm thinking about, once again, covenant. How does this relate to covenant? And so maybe it's a stretch, but I think that maybe it's just another story about how God's people and God are kind of learning how to live in covenant with one another, and this is a story about how the people, they don't know how to live that way. They keep on complaining, they keep on demanding more, they keep on being dissatisfied and not trusting in God. And so this is like another example of the people not trusting in God, that God knows what's best for them and that God wants good things for them. And complaining. And, I think the week after we've talked about the 10 Commandments, it's very poignant and pointed to me that the sin that they are confessing is that they spoke against the Lord. So that's one of the first couple of commandments, do not take the Lord's name in vain. Do not speak, use the Lord's name for something that's not holy. And that's what they were doing. They said, we spoke against the Lord. We spoke against God and Moses. And so they realized, once they were suffering, that oh goodness, that's what we did. We just learned not long ago that we shouldn't speak against the Lord, and here we just did it. Oh, we're terrible people. Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No.
I was gonna ask for your insight on the power of prayer. I think that's another big part of this story that's often overlooked, just because of the visuals of the snakes, and it's easy to focus on that. But it says a lot that Moses prayed and then that prayer was listened to
Well,
and acted on.
yeah, and it was an intercessory prayer. Moses prayed for the people, and God said, "Okay, here's how I'm going to answer that prayer," and took care of them. Yeah.
That is, God always answers. For me, it seems like God always answers a prayer in a way that is surprising,
Right.
or that I wouldn't expect. So to me, my prayer would have been, get these snakes out of here.
Right.
Which is what they prayed for. They
Right.
said,
Yeah.
pray that the Lord will send the snakes away from us. And then the Lord didn't answer it exactly.
No.
So the snakes didn't go away.
No.
So that part, God responded to their prayer in a surprising way, not by getting rid of the snakes, but simply offering another way of healing.
Is there something for us to learn from that?
I think so. I mean, we always pray for kind of the easiest common denominator,
Right.
Well,
and do we always recognize what those answered prayers look like?
Yeah.
Yeah. When it's not exactly what we
Right,
asked
right,
for.
right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I'm thinking about that too, and then you talking about the covenant and the promises and how God is with the people through everything. And so, and it is, and covenant is about being in a relationship, and it is about that relationship of God with the people and the people with each other, and how do we live that out?
Part of me sometimes wonders, because remember, this is in the early part of the Old Testament, and as Lutheran people, we often read the entire Bible through the Jesus lens. So we need to be mindful of two things. One, our own bias. The other part is that for these folks in this story, they don't have Jesus. They don't have someone who lived and taught and died on the cross and was raised for them. So sometimes I wonder if the whole thing needs to be read in the Jesus lens, as as well as not, but to recognize that it seems like God is trying to work out how to be with people and to save people as well, with the covenants and with the Ten Commandments and leading them out of Egypt and doing all these things, but it doesn't seem to work. No matter what God is going to do, and we started off this conversation with Noah, and God wiped the whole earth clean except for a family. So sometimes I think that a lot of these stories are God's attempt to make things right, and people are always messing it up. And finally, God says, "You can't do it. I'm going to do it for you," and sends His only Son into the world to save it. So for me, this is another story of God trying and us messing it up, and finally we get to that Jesus moment. And then we get to live the life that we have now.
Just one more. I was thinking too about how the people, and how I do this too. It's like, here they are, and God is providing all this stuff for them, and yet they're still complaining, and they're still grumbling, and they're saying, "We want to go back to Egypt."
Yeah.
And was that really better? No. But yet you have this idea that, you want what you had. And so I wonder how often how often we, we're thinking, living our life now saying, but what if we could just go back to how it was before, or how, and how do we move forward? How do we look to the future? How do we, look past, this?
Yeah, it reminds me of Ralph Jacobson, a wonderful theologian from Luther Seminary, said this week in their podcast, that every church has a Back to Egypt committee. And we need to think about, like, when we think about the past, we always put it in rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
We always think about, how great it was back when, And I think especially, as we're kind of going forward, coming out of this pandemic and all of these things, we might be thinking with rose-colored glasses and looking back at, the way we used to do things and thinking, that's that. All of that was wonderful. All of it was wonderful. So we have to be careful, like, not to be thinking about going back to Egypt all the time, and looking forward and saying, what can we take? What did we learn from before this? What can we take that's really valuable and really serves God's mission through our church? And what new can we do with what we learned and what we had before? And what can we leave behind? Say thank you to that thing that was served us well before.
Right.
And say, but we're going to leave that behind and we're going to go forward in this other way. Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. Are we ready for a blessing?
I think so.
All right.
I think we've wrestled with this quite a
I
bit
know, we
today.
could keep going, but well, I chose a blessing today from John O'Donohue in his book To Bless the Space Between Us, and this is a blessing titled For an Exile. When you dream, it is always home. You are there among your own, the rhythm of their voices rising like a song your blood would sing through any dark. Then you awake to find yourself listening to the sounds of traffic in another land. For a moment, your whole body recoils at the strange emptiness of where you are. This country is cold to your voice. It is still a place without echoes. Nothing of yours has happened here. No one knows you, the language slows you, the thick accent smothers your presence. You sound foreign to yourself. Their eyes reflect how strange you seem when seen across a cold distance that has no bridge to carry the charisma in which your friends delight at home. Though your work here is hard, it brings relief, helps your mind in returning to the small bounties of your absence. Evening is without protection, your room awaits, ready to take you back like some convict who is afraid of the life outside. The things you brought from home look back at you, out of place here. They take on lonely power. You cringe at the thought that somehow someone from home might see you now here in this unsheltered room. Now is the time to hold faithful to your dream, to understand that this is an interim time full of awkward disconnection. Gradually, you will come to find your way to friends who will open doors into a new belonging. Your heart will brighten with new discovery. Your presence will unclench and find ease, letting your substance and promise be seen. Slowly, a new world will open for you. The eyes of your heart, refined by this desert time, will be free to see and celebrate the new life for which you sacrificed everything.
That's lovely. Thank you. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this conversation with us, and we invite you to comment in the comments and continue the conversation together. Give us your insights of what you think about as I like to call it, the snake on a stick. And join us again next week when we'll be talking about Jeremiah's new covenant. Yes. Jeremiah's new covenant. Take care, and God bless you.